All right, I've been getting hit up with questions from my team, my clients, friends, family, anyone who finds out that I'm in real estate. What is going on with this commission settlement that the National Association of Realtors just made? So I thought I'd take the time to put together my thoughts in a video. So warning, this video is going to actually be kind of long. Sorry about that. But if you want to nerd out on all sorts of stuff related to this issue, then you're at the right place. Here's what I'm going to be going over. So what actually happened and why? What are the proposed changes from this settlement? How does commission work? What's the current situation of that and what's the proposal? What does a buyer's agent / broker do? Because that's kind of the crux of this entire lawsuit. How will this actually impact buying and selling real estate? And then does this hurt or help consumers and how? And then, of course, lastly, I'm going to be going over my speculation on what I think will happen in the future. So before I dive into any of this stuff, why should you listen to me? First and foremost, I'm not an attorney. And the reality is I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And pretty much anyone out there who says they do at this stage doesn't have a clue. Everything right now is novel with this. So even these proposed changes need to be approved by the judge before they go into effect. This settlement does. And, how it's all going to shake out in the end, anyone is guessing right now. So if you're just trying to get your arms wrapped around, what's happening or why it's happened and maybe what could happen in the future, that's exactly what I'm going to be discussing here. A little bit about my history. I have a little bit of a unique perspective. I've been selling real estate for the last 19 years, and my business partner and I have sold over 5,500 homes, over $2 billion in real estate. I've also coached real estate professionals all over the country for the last 12 years, and that's the perspective I'm bringing to this situation, is just how to navigate problems and challenges. That's literally what I've done with my team and other real estate professionals all over the country. And this is another challenge that we're going to have to navigate. So I'm just going to give you my perspective on that. So what actually happened and why? Let's go ahead and jump over to the headlines, right? NAR Settles Commission Lawsuit for $418 million. By the way, the original lawsuit was $1.7 billion, and it was up to 3x that. And it wasn't just the National Association of Realtors. It was many key brokerages that are all over the country, and they were all named in this lawsuit. I'm going to put these links for the articles that I'm referencing here, so you can go take a look at them. I'll put them in the description of the YouTube video. It shows a little bit of a timeline for this specific lawsuit and some of the other lawsuits, the copycat ones that have kind of popped up. That's probably one of the biggest pieces of the settlement, is that we're likely not going to be seeing very many lawsuits in the future around this specific topic. So what actually happened? I guess the first thing I'd want you to know is that the plaintiffs, the people suing the National Association of Realtors and these other brokerages, they have said there was no competitive pricing, or essentially there was price fixing. Now, how? Why did they say that? So I want to show you a little bit about how compensation works. Typically, it's not always this way, but I want to show you how compensation works today. So let's just pop over to Zillow. I know many of you use Zillow. We'll jump in and take a look at this specific listing right here, $350,000 in Boise, Idaho. If you were to scroll down on Zillow, there's actually this facts and features section. You can check this out on your own, wherever market you're in. You click show more. If you scroll down, you might see that they're offering compensation. So they're saying the buyer's agency fee that the seller is offering is 3% in this exact scenario. That's what they're saying. Now, the piece that they are saying is not fair is that the buyer did not negotiate that fee. So that's the crux of the issue. They're saying that if the seller hadn't already negotiated the fee to pay the buyer's agent, then the buyer could have potentially negotiated a fee with their buyer's agent that was less than 3%. Now we'll look at that. I'm going to show you how commission works and kind of the breakdown of that in a little bit. But that's essentially the crux of the issue. Now, is that 100% true? Not necessarily. I've had buyer broker agreements literally my entire career. I've always told the buyer what they're going to pay, and I'll show you what that document looks like and how it's filled out and the dialogue I have with my clients. But there are plenty of buyer's agents who don't have agreements with their buyers, and they aren't necessarily 100% forthcoming about how they're paid. A lot of them even say, hey, you don't even have to pay me as a buyer. So that's kind of the crux of this whole issue. And just so you know, not all homes listed in the MLS offer 3% or 2%. I've seen $0 many times. I've also seen upwards of 10% or higher. Usually that's a pretty unique scenario. Maybe it's an odd home, or maybe it's a really low priced home. Maybe it's like a $30,000 mobile home, and so they're offering 10%, which would be $3,000. It's kind of built into the price. Typically that seller's building in that commission because they want to entice as many buyers as possible, and they know a lot of buyers already have representation. So they want to pay that buyer's representation so they can get their home sold. All right, so what are the proposals from this change? Like, what are they actually proposing take place? If we dive over again to these articles here, I got this Wall Street Journal one from this morning. I'm going to show you something in here. And again, I'll put this link up here. I think it's kind of comical. We'll jump back to that. The actual proposals themselves there's really two. There's two main proposals that they're wanting to make sure take place. Number one is they want to make sure that there is no longer a commission offered in the multiple listing service. So that commission I just showed you guys in Zillow there, they're saying, hey, can't do that anymore. They're not saying you can't pay, the seller can't pay a buyer's agent's commission. That's not what they're saying at all. They're saying it cannot be offered. Okay? Publicly offered. It can't be displayed anywhere. So it's not going to be in the MLS anymore. Therefore, it's not going to syndicate to Zillow, Homes.com, Realtor.com, truly all these sites that are out there. There's no longer going to be a commission offered. The second major change is that if you are a buyer and you are working with an agent, you must have a signed agreement with that agent. And I'm assuming that signed agreement, they didn't necessarily go into detail on this, but I'm assuming that signed agreement will include how are you going to be paying the buyer's agent. There's questions that I have about this. This is the speculation piece, is at what point does a buyer agent need to have one of these signed? So as of today, right now, before this stuff goes into effect, by the way, this goes into effect sometime around mid-July of 2024. As I'm filming this, it's March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patty's Day. So that's when these things go into effect. But right now, if you're a buyer and you want to go see homes, you can call any agent up. And if they agree to show you those homes, you don't have to sign anything. So you're not on the hook, and the agent can decide, yeah, I'm going to show you and maybe we'll work together, or no, I'm not going to show you. My current position on this is I don't show homes to people I'm not in agreement with. And there's a ton of reasons for that. A lot of times we're wasting time, by the way. Like, a great buyer's agent should be sitting down with you for a buyer consultation. This is what I've had in my business for, 12 years now. I started doing it in 2012 because I had so many buyers that would look at homes they don't even like, and they'd be like, gosh, I thought it was I thought the master was on the main. And I'm like, well, if I knew that was important to you, I wouldn't have shown you this house. So I could have saved them more time. Plus the expectation setting and finding them properties, even though they can look at Zillow and all these things, they don't necessarily know how to use those tools to the best of their abilities. And I do this every day for a living. So me sitting down with them for a buyer consultation, answering all the questions that they have, setting up a custom search. I can even go after homes that aren't actively on the MLS for them, like maybe expired listings or canceled listings that I know meet their criteria if I know. So the value of a buyer's agent, which again we'll jump into here in a little bit, and I'm already kind of getting ahead of myself, it's there. It's there if you have the right agent. So as of today, you could just go look at any home you want on the MLS. Now, or any home out there. You can get an agent, they can tour it. But going forward, and again, we're going to have to get into the legalities of this. This is the stuff that's going to shake out, is you will need to be signed with an agent in order for them to, I believe, show you property. I don't know how they're all going to do it. There's going to be some sort of caveat. At what point are you required? Like open houses, for example, if an agent holds an open house, like I doubt they're going to require that you sign an agreement with them just to walk into the house, right? What if you already have an agreement with someone else? So these are just some odd things that we're going to have to shake out. And, you know, the other question is to avoid paying a fee. So let's just say you want to represent yourself, which, by the way, this happens today all the time. I see this happen, you know, often. When, you know, I primarily have been a listing agent for the last 10 years of my career. I haven't really worked a lot with buyers. And, you know, I coach our listing agents on our team. We get people that call all the time and say, hey, I want to go tour this house. And we're like, great. And after you ask them a few questions, you realize that they want to represent themselves. So what does that look like? You know, who's going to write the offer? How are you going to get into the house? Someone's got to let you in. Well, of course, the listing agent would be the one that would let you in. Someone's got to let the home inspector in. Someone's got to let grandma in to see it. Someone's got to help them do the final walkthrough. Someone's got to do all this stuff. Like, are you going to compensate them for that? And these are the questions I have for these people that call in and say, hey, I want to represent myself. I'm like, well, are you licensed? No. Do you know how to write offers? No. Do you have a way to access the home? No. My seller's not going to let me let someone randomly in the house without me being there. So do I just do extra things? Now you might be thinking, well, gosh, you're there to help the listing, or you're listing the home, so you should do everything you can to sell the home for your seller. That is true. You should do everything you can to sell the home for the seller. But I would ask my seller, like, hey, are you comfortable with me letting random people into your house that I don't know if they're qualified, and they're not willing to answer any questions for me, and I can't tell you how serious they are? Like, do you want to leave your home, pack up your kids, clean it all out, and let someone tour it for an hour without having these questions answered? Ask yourself that if you're the seller. And when I ask that question, most of my sellers are like, no, I don't want random strangers walking in. I want to make sure they either, you know, they are qualified, or they have cash or proof of funds, or some way they can actually buy my home before they're just touring my house. So this is kind of complicated, as you can see, you know, and I see both sides of this. I totally understand how you could feel either one of these emotions around what you should and shouldn't do. But long story short, my sellers, by and large, want to have someone walking through the home who has an agent. Why? The agent has done the due diligence, asked them the questions typically, helped them get qualified. They know that they're serious. Like, all those things end up being a higher likelihood of truth versus the random person saying, hey, I'm out front. I want to walk through this home right now and I don't have an agent, so show it to me. So, okay, enough about that. Let's dive into how does commission actually work and what's the proposed change. So we're going to jump over here and take a quick peek. So how it works today. So, you know, we had that listing. This listing I showed you, $350,000. This is in Boise. Pretty inexpensive for the Boise area. They're offering a 3% fee. I'm going to assume that the listing agent is also getting a 3% fee. This could be lower or higher. It doesn't really matter. This is just an assumption I'm making here. So purchase price $350,000. Listing commissions 3%. We know they're offering the buyer commission 3%. So the seller's paying both of those fees, which means the seller's netting $329,000. So they list at $350,000. They're netting $329,000. Now, you know, for those of you nerding out, they're not actually going to net $329,000. They're going to have to pay some additional fees like title and escrow and some other stuff. But just for our example here, let's keep it super simple. This is just the purchase price less the commission. They're going to get $329,000. Now, notice I have something up here. How much is the buyer out of pocket? Well, we don't know for sure, but assuming the buyer's agent is only making the 3% commission from the offer that the listing made, the buyer has no money out of pocket for buying the home and being represented. So that's how it currently works. Now, this can change, right? Like sometimes I told you some of those listings, the MLS might be zero. Well, and I'll take a look at the form here in a second, and you can see how it might change. But this is what is currently taking place. Let's go and look what they want to have happen. So the proposal is now $350,000 purchase price. Again, we're going to assume the listing agent's charging 3%. Now, the buyer was able to negotiate their own commission, and let's say they negotiated a 2% commission, which means the buyer is going to be paying 2% of $350,000. That's $7,000. Now, this is what's interesting. That's out of the buyer's pocket. So the buyer's now spending $7,000. Now the seller's net is higher by $10,500. Come back here, they were netting $329. Come over here, they're netting $339.5. So then we look at this and we're like, okay, did the buyer actually save money? Well, they spent $0 last time, and now they're spending $7,000. Right? So are they actually saving money? And the reality is, this is actually wrong. The reality is they're spending $7,000. So it's negative $7,000 in this scenario. So was it better for the buyer? Now, guys, something I want to discuss here is there's probably going to be price discovery. So assuming this all goes through just as planned, there's going to be price discovery. Buyers are going to say, hey, you're not paying my commission. So instead of you saving 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever the number is, I want to save that as a buyer, so I'm going to offer less. So price discovery, I have full confidence that will take place. It's going to take time. It could be years before a market really actually gets full price discovery and it's priced in whether a commission's being paid or not, by the seller. But as of right this exact second, it's not necessarily going to be in the buyer's best interest, as you can see, because the buyer's going to be paying out of pocket. No matter what they negotiate, they're going to be paying out of pocket. So even if they're not paying 3%, they're paying whatever, a flat fee of $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever, they're still paying $3,000 and they were paying, $0 with the older system. Now this is debatable too, and I guess we'll jump back over to let's see, take a quick look here. We'll jump back over to who's actually paying the commission. This is the debate that I hear all the time, which is the buyer, doesn't pay the commission. But then you hear, well, where'd the seller get the $350K from? So the seller's getting the $350,000 from the buyer, and then the buyer's using that, the seller's using that money now to pay the commission. So who's actually paying it, the buyer or the seller? Look, it doesn't really matter because it's priced in. That's the bottom line. The seller's pricing it in. And, just so you guys all know, when we go over to let me click on this other screen. When we go over to a for sale by owner, for example, and the for sale by owner tells us hey, Chase, I will not pay a buyer agent commission. And I said, okay. Now I have a contract with my buyer, which I'm actually going to show you right now. Let's jump over to that contract. So this is a buyer broker compensation agreement. We talked about, this being something that is, let me show you. We talked about this being something that's going to be required in mid-July. This is the Idaho form. These forms look different in every single state in the country. So this might look foreign to you, but it basically just says hey, today's date, buyer's agent, who the buyer is, who the broker is, what company you're working with, where geographically is this taking place, how long is this agreement for. Typically, this is going to be a 6-month agreement or so. I've seen as little as 30 days. I've seen as much as a couple years, depending on the buyer's scenario. But 6 months is pretty typical. Now you come down to the meat and potatoes of the compensation part. Our compensation, we typically charge 3% to the buyer. Now we let our buyers know. I told you I would tell you how I explain this to my buyer client. I say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, my goal is to get the seller to pay my fee. But in the event the seller's not willing to pay my fee, I want you to know what it is. It's 3%. Now, if for whatever reason they cannot pay my fee, or they're not willing to pay my fee, I'll make sure you know before we go look. That way you understand what you're going to be paying for my services out of your own pocket, and then you can adjust your offer accordingly. Because at the end of the day, whether the seller's paying the fee or the buyer's paying the fee, the price matters. So when a for sale by owner is listed at the same price as another home down the street, one of them's paying commission, one of them's not paying a commission. The buyer just has to do some extra math to figure out that one's a better deal and one's not. So if they want the for sale by owner, but they know they're going to have to pay the buyer agent fee, what do you think they're going to do in their offer? They're probably going to offer less, and it's typically the amount of money that they would have to pay. So that's what a buyer broker, agreement looks like. And that's how we handle them today with for sale by owners. And this is very common practice too in, commercial deals. I do a lot of land deals in our area, and, the compensation's written right into a letter of intent, and then it's written right into a purchase and sale agreement, how each agent's getting paid and who's paying for it. And typically we're negotiating that well in advance before we go show properties. Another thing I do currently, because I'm charging my buyer clients 3% to represent them on the buy side, is if I see that there's a compensation being offered that's less than 3%, what I'll do is I'll reach out to the seller before we show it, and I'll send them a form asking them to pay 3%. The biggest problem that the industry has is, unfortunately, not all agents are created equal. So they don't even understand some of the agents don't even understand what the agreement is. They haven't really explained it to their seller, et cetera, et cetera. I think some of them don't even present it to their seller, which is a major, major issue. Anytime you get some sort of contract for a property, you should present that to your seller. But unfortunately, I think a lot of agents don't do it. So I am proactive about that, trying to get the seller to pay, the fee that I'm charging my buyer. But if for whatever reason they won't, I tell my buyer, hey, they're offering 2%. As you know, you're paying me 3%, which means there's a gap of 1%. So this particular home, you're going to have to factor in an additional 1% for my services. Let's go ahead and make our offer accordingly. It's just an extra step. It's an extra math equation. It's something we have to figure out. All right, so now you know how commissions work. So what does a buyer's agent do? They're more than just a big key. At least they should be. So many buyers out there, and a lot of people who judge these buyers out there, buyer's agents out there, they think that a real estate agent is only good for opening doors. And while some real estate agents, that might be true, a great agent will do so much more than that. We already talked about the buyer consultation. They can help you comp out properties to make sure you're getting fair value. They can help you navigate the really complicated buying process, which changes all the time depending on what's going on in the market. It's anywhere from writing offers, negotiating contracts, doing helping you with the home inspection process and the negotiations from the home inspection. You would not believe how many deals get blown up because buyers and sellers can't get on the same page in terms of negotiating that home inspection. They can overcome the numerous hurdles that inevitably pop up in every single transaction, help you get across the finish line. Also, fun fact, 71% of all real estate litigations come from a result of one party not being represented. That's incredible. That's an incredible statistic. And, I often ask this question to buyers and sellers that are out there. Like, if you had to do something super important, let's say you had to defend yourself in trial, could you save money doing it on your own? The answer is absolutely, right? What about, you had emergency surgery? And, what are you looking for in the person that helps you with this? God forbid you're going to do it on your own. I mean, I would hope you're probably not going to do that. But are you going to shop around and look for the cheapest possible option? Or are you going to be looking for experience and looking for guidance? And, do you want the person that's trying it for the first time so you're getting a discount? Or do you want the person who's done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, even though they're not the cheapest? You're performing financial surgery. This is the biggest purchase that the majority of people will make in their lives. I strongly recommend that you work with a professional on this process, just like you would and trial, and just like you would with some sort of major surgery or medical issue. All right, so how will this actually impact buying and selling? Well, the number one thing is, in order for you to see all the homes on the market, you're going to need to hire a buyer broker. I already mentioned, historically you could just grab an agent and whoever opened the door for you was good. That's not going to work anymore. These agents are going to be asking you to enter into an agreement with them before they go out and tour you properties. I do think the industry is actually going to have a lot of pop-ups of discount services for buyers. Right now, if you hire me and I said I charge you 3% and I go tour properties with you, I do that for free up front. I only get paid on the successful close of your transaction. That's how it works today. I think a lot of these pop-up buyer things, they're going to, let's say it's a flat fee of whatever, $3,000 or $5,000 to help you find a home. They're going to charge you half of that up front, or maybe even all of that up front, or they're going to have some sort of payment plan. They're not going to just jump in their car and go show you any property you want to see for free. So I do think that's going to be something that changes. I also think the biggest change, and this is the hardest thing to swallow, is you're going to have more money as a buyer ready to go than you have in the past. And this is already a major challenge for people. They have trouble coming up with the down payment in order to move forward on their home. They have trouble coming up with closing costs. Now they're going to have trouble coming up with a fee to pay a representative. So they're either going to hire an inferior representative, or unfortunately, they might not even hire a representative at all in order to save money. And I get really concerned about that. So does this help or hurt consumer? Now, many people I've been seeing all over the internet think this is a huge win for the consumer. I don't necessarily see that. I think this looks to be a huge hurdle in homeownership. Real estate's one of the biggest paths to wealth. In fact, the average net worth of a homeowner versus the average net worth of a renter, the homeowner has 40 times more net worth, a 40 times higher net worth. I think it's something like $200,000 net worth, and a renter's like $5,000. So now we have more of a challenge to get into real estate and purchase it. And unfortunately, this is going to hurt people without money. The rich get richer. This is a hurdle for so many people that don't have the means that, maybe some of these wealthier people who already own a lot of real estate have. So I think this is a huge issue. And I think that will come out in legislation in the future. I think this also ultimately hurts the seller. Even though the seller might be like, hey, I don't have to pay commission. You're going to have less people that are able to buy, which means you're going to have less money for the real estate you're selling. I think it's all going to balance out in the wash ultimately, but there will be less buyers without a major change in some legislation, which actually takes me over to my speculation on kind of what's going to break down. First of all, I already went over price discovery. So this will take time to flesh out. But I think different markets will handle this in different ways. I think, the people who are doing the most business in your market will probably set the precedence for how it's going to work in your market. Whether sellers are going to be, as a standard, be willing to pay for your buyer representative and how much they're willing to pay. I think that's probably something that will get flushed out. Or if it's a standard that sellers don't pay buyer representatives ever, that could be something that pops up too. Every market's going to be a little bit different. I would say your like vacation home markets, your discretionary spending type markets are probably going to be more prone to saying, well, we're not paying fees for your buyer representation. And I think some of these more first-time home buyer markets, it's going to be probably a standard, if you will, that they're willing to help pay for your buyer representative because they know you don't have the money to do it. A new normal will be established for buyers that don't have to fund the funds to hire an agent. So let me show you what I mean by that. Right now this is just a normal purchase and sale agreement for the state of Idaho. We have these check boxes where it's like who pays what. For example, the appraisal fee, like who's going to pay it. There is no real standard, but there's kind of a more of a norm, if you will. Look, the buyer has to get a loan, so they're going to pay for their own appraisal fee. And then they're going to share the closing escrow fee. These are pretty standard things in our market. Lender doc prep, tax service fee, these are standard that buyers pay them. Now, you can negotiate any of this stuff. Like, there's no hard and fast rule. But notice what I put down here. This is something that I think will probably become a standardized piece inside of most of the purchase and sale agreements we see across the country, which is, buyer agency fee of blank percentage of the sales price to be paid for by buyer, seller, whatever, or shared equally. I think this is where people are probably going to be negotiating inside of the contracts, and this will become more of a standard thing, because before it was kind of taboo to talk about buyer agent commission inside of purchase and sale agreements because it was already in the MLS. But now I think you're going to actually see that completely flip-flop, where it's going to be very normal to say, like, I don't have the money to pay my buyer agent, but I definitely want one, and I have one, and I already hired them, so I want to see the seller pay for this. And then you're going to negotiate on price based on who's paying those fees. It's all about price and terms, right? That's what the business is all about. There's probably going to be a lot of discounted services for buyers. That already exists today, but I think you're going to see a lot of these come out of the woodwork. I think you're going to see big tech step in and have this solution to solve the buyer's agent's problems, and they're probably going to make no money because they're going to realize that they're going to have to pay these people salary. But I think what they're going to do is they're going to be trying to get market share, and then they're going to be making money through other avenues, which again, we already see this right now, but they're looking for you to use their own title company. That's a way that they can actually make profit. Their escrow company, their insurance, their lender, maybe they have their own home inspection services. Maybe they're going to sell your data. I don't really know, but you're going to see that pop up. And for some of you, you might be like, I don't care who I work with. It sounds good to me. I'm saving money, which is totally fine. I just think that's something you're going to see come through. I also think you're going to see legislation be introduced to help homeownership, because what's happened with this lawsuit, I think by and large, is going to cause less homeownership without some changes. And what I mean by that is, so many agents right now are talking about, well, just ask the seller to pay the commission and everything's fine. Well, loans right now only allow the seller to give a certain amount of concessions in order for you to get that loan. So, if you need your closing costs paid for, and let's say that's 2%, some loans only allow you to have 3% total. So if your buyer agent fee is 2%, now you have to come out of pocket with that 1%. I think you're going to see legislation come through saying that buyer agency is important and buyers deserve to be represented. And so it's not going to affect their loan in terms of seller concessions. That's one of my predictions that I think is going to take place. I do want to say one thing about this article, which I think is really interesting. This is the last thing. It's obviously a very biased piece of information. You already know where I stand on this. But let's jump over to this article real quick. This is the Wall Street Journal article. Again, I'll put the link in the description for you. But I found this really funny. This is someone named Repka. They said despite discounted commission rates, so they pay buyers agents less money basically. They said despite discounted commission rates, Repka said the demand for listings was strong. One Palo Alto home that listed at just under $2 million and offered a $10,000 buyer's commission got 17 offers. The home sold for $2.7 million. That means if the seller paid a more typical 2.5% commission to the buyer's agent, the fee would have been $67,500. So what they're saying is that they just saved this seller, basically $10,000 less the $67,500. They saved him $57,500. But what's comical to me is they listed the home for less than $2 million. So what kind of advice did they get from this listing agent on pricing the home? What if it wouldn't have got 17 offers? And that's all up for debate, by the way. Maybe they priced it low and tried to get bid up, but their whole, you can read this article, their whole thing is like, well, we let the sellers negotiate on their own. Well, let's just be super clear. $2.7 million, okay, and they're saving $55,000. That's essentially 2%. So if they would have maybe listed this at 2.9 million and they only got 2 offers and sold it for 200 grand more, like, is that a possibility? Of course it's a possibility. Now, none of us will know. We'll never know because I don't know what this house is and if they priced it right or not. But if you got 17 offers, you did not price it right. Period, the end. And this is why agency matters and why I think you guys, now more than ever, the one piece of advice I would give you as a buyer or a seller is interview your agent. And that's another thing I think that's going to be taking place, by the way, with this new change, is that agents are going to be criticized much more on the buyer side. Sellers have always criticized agents. Like they interview more agents than buyers. Like buyers, typically right now, they just find an agent. Oh, my cousin's an agent, or my wife's friend's uncle's an agent, or whatever. And they just work with them. But now that you're going to have to hire an agent and you're going to have to write a check out of your own pocket for that agent, I think you're going to be interviewing the agent to find out what they can do. So now more than ever, the value a real estate agent provides will be put under a microscope. And for agents like myself and our team, Livy and Select and City of Trees Real Estate, we are excited about that because we know we provide a ton of value and we can't wait to show that value to the potential buyers and sellers we'll work with. Now, for you agents out there that are watching this, look, don't fret. Things are definitely going to change, and no one knows exactly how it's going to shake out. This is just my opinion. I thank you guys so much for watching this. Check out our YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe or follow. We'll give you more information as it unfolds around this and other topics. Have an amazing day.